Okay, we're going to talk about snakes today. I'm PL. I work for Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. We're going to be talking about the three native snake species we have in the UK, which is the grass or ring snake, the adder, and the smooth snake, which isn't present in Wales, but they're down in the southern heathlands. Also, we have an introduced species that's established at two locations, including one in Wales, the Aesculapian snake. So looking at the grass snake, first of all, it's our biggest land-based reptile. I say that, but obviously we do have turtles in our waters that are bigger. So it's not our biggest UK reptile, but it's our biggest land-based reptile. Very fast and alert. People don't tend to see them hanging around. Kind of a olivey green color more often than not. Grey-green. Often with that yellow collar behind the head. Sometimes that fades away, particularly with older animals and more often not older females. But behind the yellow collar, there's always that two black triangles, if you like, immediately behind the yellow collar. So even if that yellow collar fades, that's a good characteristic to look for, the black collar behind it. Round pupils as opposed to slit pupils. Okay, you're noticing quite a variation in color, size also. So males are generally much smaller and they have proportionately longer, more gradually tapering tails. Females are bigger, chunkier animals, much bigger animals, and they have shorter, more obvious stumpy tails. You can see her yellow collar is kind of fading away there. She might lose that when she's even older, but she's mature there. Females and males, telling them apart, I look at their head structures. On the left there, you can see that female, even though we're looking at her from a side, she's got a heavy brow above her eyes, and you can see the sun glinting off those cheek muscles, those big, powerful jaws she's got there. Compared to the animal on the right, we're looking head on, really narrow, pretty weak, puny jaws, eyes bulging out further than the jawline. Okay. Very different looking animals. Look at the head of this animal. She's very nicely patterned. Remember, the other name is ringed snake. There's the rings for you all the way along. But behind her, quite diminishing yellow collar, you can see the two black triangles I told you about. Okay, they're always there. But look how wide her head is, and you can see her eyes, and you can see how the jaw bones and muscles extend way beyond the eyes, where I was describing those last pictures we saw too. Compare that to the male. Lots of diversification. This is a young female, but she's melanistic. She's covered in muck because she's not long emerged from hibernation. This one's pretty much orange in color. Lots of diversification. Adders are also very varied, incredibly diverse. Much shorter, stockier, chunkier snake than the grass snake, which is longer and more slender by comparison. Males tend to be a silvery grey more often than not, always with a black zigzag. Females tend to be more brown, but there's a lot of variation in the intensity of the brown zigzag. Quite a few different ways of telling the sexes apart. These two are textbook examples and very obvious, but it's not always quite that easy. These are both males, for example, both got black zigzags, not looking very silver or grey as the base colour. That's because they're not long out of hibernation and they haven't sloughed yet. They haven't shed their skin. Or indeed later on in the season, prior to sloughing again, they'll look equally dull then too. But you can see also the difference in the zigzags there. Lots of individual variation. Closer look, the rostral scales, which are those scales around the lips area, okay, where we would have lips. In the case of males, they tend to be framed, normally with black, but framed. You can see the female on the right. She's just got the very, very light framing of like a gingery color by comparison to the male. But on the whole, they don't have that framing at all compared to the male. You can see what I'm talking about. Here's another female for you. Lots of variation again. They usually have a brown zigzag of various different shades, but can be black also. Now, look at this big female. She's spread herself out to soak up as much sun as you possibly can. Immediately to the far left of the picture, the far left, halfway up, you can make out an immature adolescent male. Just up, see that coloration, that black and white zigzag. Look how much smaller he is than the female. Here's a female with a black zigzag. So they do have black zigzags on occasion. This one was photographed by a friend of mine, Fred Holmes, down in Surrey, Heathland situation. Wouldn't confuse that with a male, even with the black zigzag, or without looking at the rostral scales around the mouth, just because the ground color is so rich. You don't tend to find males with such a rich ground color as that beautiful tan color we have there. Here's another big female with a black zigzag, and this is a Neathpot Talbot, but no, it was a female because saw the behavior with three males courting behavior, not close, not far away from her, not long after emergence from hibernation in Neathpot Talbot. Lots of variation, again, diversification, melanistic adder there. Everyone's heard of black adders, I'm sure. This animal is unusual. The patternization is atypical, hasn't got the normal zigzag, but that's an adder, a male as well. Is a beautiful blue male, very silvery blue, not long, well, probably just sloughed very recently. Juveniles are often a ginger or reddish color, but not always. Just a few pictures for you to compare species together now in the field. So we've got a female adder there, dark-faced female adder, wrapped up and cozy with a grass snake. That was probably beneath a survey refuge, which has been lifted for the photograph. This is underneath a much larger one. You can see the funnels in the ground where the corrugations have left those funnels. So you've got three grass snakes and a female adder there. Comparison of juvenile grass snakes with juvenile adder for you. Look at the difference in the eyes. That's very significant. Overall, the grass snake is long and slender, not so short and stocky. And then there's the obvious zigzag. Okay. Going backwards, sorry. Here you've got a female adder snuggled up with a gang of slowworms underneath a survey refuge. Now they're not best buddies, and there would be occasions when a grass snake, when an adder would predate slowworms. But these guys are all full of food, all of them, and they're wanting to thermoregulate. They're wanting to raise their body temperature so they can digest their food. A big heap of reptiles, much like a huddle of penguins, will conserve heat longer than individuals. So quite often find mixed species thermoregulating balls like this. Here's another example beneath a refuge of grass snake and a large adult male slowworm. He's very, very war wound and battle scarred. He's lost his tail. Quite an elderly male, and that's a mature female grass snake looking, well, maturing female grass snake, looking about the size comparison and the shape of her head. Nice wide jaw she's got there. Grass snakes, slow worms, and just out of the picture, half out of the picture on the far right, an adder. All those pictures were taken underneath survey refuge once lifted, but this one is out in the open, visual search, basking. Grass snake and a slow worm intertwined, soaking up the heat together. Very briefly, we'll talk about the smooth snake. You're not going to see any of those in Wales. It's not Wales relevant, but they are a UK species. I spent a bit of time with them in my youth, and since I've done a fair bit of surveying for them in England. Also, they're an interesting species. They're very different. They're constrictors, okay, and they predominantly predate other reptiles, including adders. This photograph was taken once a survey refuge was lifted on a golf course in Surrey, which has got lots of heathland habitat adjacent to it and around it. The golf course owned the heathland habitat. So you can see the sandy soil. The sand lizards present there also, which are one of the prey items for smooth snakes. On the right, we've got an adult female smooth snake. On the left, a grass snake or ringed snake. Now, interestingly, you can't see the yellow collar on the grass snake. Can you see how the grass snake's placed its coil over it, obscuring it? Perhaps this is deliberate action, we're not sure. Here you've got a smooth snake on the left, grass snake in the middle, female adder on the right. Looks like a male grass snake. It's got a very, very narrow head. And this is our friend the Aesculapian snake, so a European species. It's essentially a rat snake, and there's a colony established down in London along the canal in Camden Lock and Regent's Park, around that area. They're more often than not seen up off the ground, as you can see this animal on the top left is, in bushes and trees and scrub. They're rat snakes. That's the group that they're in. I expect they're feeding on rats, grey squirrels out of their nests, out of their drays, pigeons, that kind of stuff. And there's an individual that's got a belly full of something. May have been a nest full of squirrels, a nest full of rats, who knows. Occasionally we get escapees. This is a North American species, the corn snake. That's very popular in captivity. This is another North American species, the milk snake, and Mexican it can be as well, actually. Pueblan, perhaps. Yeah, milk snake, Lampropeltis, one of the king snakes. And it's mimicking a coral snake. Okay, so the rhyme to let you know it's safe is red against black, venom lack, red against yellow, could kill a fellow. So you can see with this one, it's red facing black, venom lack. It's a milk snake, harmless, unless you're another species of snake, because funnily enough, they like to feed on other snakes. Not established here, but found now and again in people's gardens as escaped pets. So let's look at the ecology of our snakes. So as you know, reptiles are ectotherms, entirely dependent on an external heat source. That's quite challenging if you live in Wales. Thermoregulation is the key, so basically moving towards and away from heat sources. Hibernation, emergence, thermoregulation, and indeed basking to take on ultraviolet light, which helps male snakes develop viable sperm. That's really important. Sloughing, and once the sloughing occurs, you get pheromones wafting about, and lots of activity and mating. And that's generally how adders do things. Grass snakes is a little different. Okay. Sloughing again prior to hibernation, and that's the snake's year. So in order to be effective thermoregulators, if you're an ectotherm, then you need structural diversity in your habitat. Okay. We've discussed this with the lizards. Here we've got a great example of it in Bridgend. So you've got aspect, it's on a slope, it's south facing. So you've got what we call thermal momentum, heat buildup because of the aspect. No vegetation much higher than a meter. You've got gorse islands there, interspersed with bracken. two species that everyone wants to eradicate. We don't want it everywhere, but in this situation, it's providing shelter for reptiles. It's providing opportunities for hibernation because gorse roots break up the underground structure and create opportunities for crevices and get below the frost line. Intercepted everywhere throughout with little patches of bracken. We know bracken is a vegetation type that adders in particular take great advantage of, including following studies using telemetry where they were tracked when they were moving around in the bracken thatch, topsoil thatch, without surfacing for weeks on end on some occasions. They don't need the ultraviolet. So once they've developed their viable sperm, they don't need so much ultraviolet as lizards do. Lizards eat insects. They need lots of sun, ultraviolet all the time. Snakes consume entire voles, entire lizards, so they're getting a big hit of all the vitamins and minerals that you need, really. So they can, in the active season, they can stay, as long as it's warm, they can stay out of sight where there's lots of voles, etc., for quite a long time. And the bracken thatch provides that opportunity. Here's one in that bracken. That, if you can see that at the top in the middle, that's the adder's eye. You can see the red eye there, looking straight at me as I took that picture. But they don't want to be found. That's cryptic or mosaic basking there. Sections of the animal in the sun, sections of it hidden. There's some habitat for them on the gower, different kind of thing going on there. It's not the, well, you've still got gorse there, I guess, but it can be all kinds of different vegetation. It's not the species so much as the structure. Here we've got an edge on the gower. This is tussocky malinia, bordering scrub. There's an adder right in the middle of that malinia, and I'm just showing you there its head. You can make out its eye is cloudy. It's in a slough cycle, and that's a young female. Some coastal habitat in Pembrokeshire, in Newport. This is upland, inland, moorland, Torfaen, South Wales. Here we've got the same thing going on, but it's heather that's the dominant plant species. Same thing going on here on the dunes, coastal dunes, undulating terrain, no vegetation higher than a meter, but this time it's marram grass. But this is even better. Why is it even better? Because it's interspersed with sand, and we all know how warm sand gets. So for reptiles, it's paradise. For adders specifically, here's a typical example for you of different habitat features and how they're utilized. So you've got a south-facing gorse bank, and we can see the rocks, that it's shallow soil there because of the rocks. So very likely to be lots of retreats, subterranean retreats, where they can get below the frost line and hibernate, as well as basking areas as soon as they emerge. You've got edges everywhere. So that interface between the gorse and the grass, good place for an adder to bask. Full exposure to the sun, literally just a quick wriggle away into cover. And then we've got wet tussocky grassland at the bottom there. Lots of voles. There'll be lizards using the tussocky habitat. Frogs as well. Adders don't turn their nose up to frogs, particularly when they're younger. And you can see the vegetated hedge bank, number 4 there. That's connectivity and dispersal. So adders can migrate to or from this habitat through what is otherwise pretty inhospitable agricultural land. Edges are incredibly important. We just discussed that with the lizards previously as well. Lots of examples there. Some of them can be pretty subtle, but yeah, edges disproportionately important to reptiles. There's a suburban bit of scrubby grassland edge. There's a more subtle edge there on the left, but I'm telling you, reptiles love those edges. And those little gorse islands, stunted islands you can see in the bottom left there, sculpted by the wind, they will themselves also be providing microclimates along those edges that reptiles will use as sheltered sun traps, the right side of those little clumps. Need to have a hibernation site within this habitat. There's your particulars. It's got to be free from the frost. Don't want to be flooded. Don't want rats to get in there either. Okay, so really tight entrances it will need. And it needs thermal momentum, so a nice aspect. So immediately upon emergence, the animals can bask and start soaking up that UV. Lots of different examples. Obviously, it needs to be a bit more substantial than in the case of lizards because they're bigger animals. Okay. Yeah, crumbling foundations and old walls are regularly used. Abandoned human structures used all the time. Old Kenfig Castle, for example, really good grass snake hibernation site. Here's one in Caerphilly. Nothing to look at, south-facing bank, structurally diverse because you've got little straggly, clumpy bits of gorse having that effect out of sight below ground that I told you about, breaking up and causing cracks and fissures below the ground. South-facing aspect, sun hitting it full on, bit of bracken and dispersed there. In the summer, the bracken's going to shade it out. In the spring, early spring, when the adders are emerging from hibernation, there's lots of sun there for them. There's a juvenile at that very self-same site. Same kind of thing going on within heather and in Torvine. There's an adder at the entrance. You can see him looking straight at the camera. Closer look at him. So they might hibernate singly or in a big group together, not because they're best mates, just because conditions are often not available all over the place. So they quite often have to share. And as we've said before, this can be devastating if inappropriate habitat management is taken in the winter when it's occupied. People don't know about it. So this kind of work is done by the good guys, but who weren't aware of the potential damage they're doing to adders. Adders, until recently, there's a lot more awareness these days, thankfully. We still need to do more work. Adders have really been under the radar for people, even sympathetic land managers, just because if you can't see them, you don't think about them. Here's a Neathport Talbot adder, spreading himself out to soak up the sun, spreading himself out flat like a solar panel. Big group of grass snakes at entrance to the hibernation site in Bridgend. Big pile of them there together. Neathport Talbot hibernation bank there. Again, in the spring, there's no leaves on the trees. And you see the adders there. You can see one wrapped around the fence post, basically, where the tussocky structure's growing through. All over these banks on hedge lines. This is in Neathport Talbot as well. Adders upon emergence. This is a sunny March morning. Pembrokeshire roadside, same thing going on there. Lots of opportunities to get below the frost line with all that root structure, full on exposure to the sun, right close to the road. There it is. It's literally 2 feet away from passing traffic. Plenty of animals utilizing it. You can see them jittering with the stinger nettles when the stinger nettles touch them and they're moving for position to pass. So it does have effect on them visibly. Another example in Pembrokeshire, all 4 widespread reptile species there. There's a male adder, mosaic basking, like we discussed earlier. Common lizards use it too. And on the dunes, somewhere I love the dunes, as you all know. See that little sand patch there? There's an adder on it, closer view. So those little sand patches, they're the kind of things that reptiles can really charge up on quickly. And it's surrounded by cover, so there's nothing to just quickly dash out of there into safe retreat. But that's going to get really warm really quickly. Beautiful dark animal. He's yet to slough. Not long out of hibernation. He'll look a lot brighter than that once he shed his skin. It's not just adders on the dunes. There's a big chunk of a female grass snake I photographed on a sand dune system. Here's another example just to show you where reptiles will hibernate sometimes. It's quite dicey, but you see how close we are to the sea edge there, the frontal dunes. So top right, the rear side of this dune, the more fixed part of it, You can just about make out there's an adder there. You can see the zigzags. Remember, the wind's blowing, and there's a grass snake there. I'm standing on the ridge, so straight away I gave my position away. They saw my silhouette. Well, the adder did, and the adder was gone. But the grass snake still hung around. You can see it's a lovely gingery coloured grass snake. The reason he hung around is because he had coils over his eyes and he couldn't actually see me. Another adder on the dunes, flattening itself out in the sun. A big heap of males recently emerged from their hibernaculum in the dunes. Spot the adders here on a bank on the dunes, very close to a path that everybody's walking past, unaware of what they're passing by. Adders are particularly tough. Here's one basking when there's snow on the ground. This is up in Derbyshire. These are male adders. I photographed all of these on the same day in December, a few years back now. I've got plenty of pictures of them on Boxing Day, etc. A very early female grass snake, looking beautiful there. She's done an early slough. That was late February a few years back. Very early for grass snakes to emerge. An adder, male adder, upon emergence, you can see he's got very dull coloration because he hasn't sloughed, and you can see how blue and milky blue his eyes looking. He hasn't shed his skin yet. Same with this guy. And then you start to find sloughs dotted everywhere. Remember, one single scale across the belly like that denotes snake. On the dorsal surface, it would be small escalation that you're more familiar with. If it was a slow worm, it would be small scalation all the way around. But this is a snake because it's got a single scalation all the way across its belly. Some more skins view there. Obvious grass snake on the top right. You can see its yellow collar, or the gap for the light color behind its eyes. So here's a male adder when he has sloughed his skin. Real obvious demarcation between the ground color and the zigzag. Grass snakes emerging from hibernation, covered in muck, and they're a bit different to adders. If it's a communal hibernation site, or if females are nearby and males can smell them straight from emergence, they're at it straight away. In fact, they can even be seen exhibiting mating behavior in the autumn when they're gathering at the mating site. I've seen it myself. At the hibernation site, I've seen it myself. So you get the situation that you call a mating ball. So you've got one big female and several much smaller males pursuing her. There is actual copulation going on there because you can see the hemipenis, the one that isn't being used. Remember, hemipenis is a reptile sexual organ, which literally means split penis. So they use one side of it at a time. It's kind of showing off, I guess, but you can see there's copulation going on there because we can see the exposed part of the hemipenis that isn't being used. But yeah, mating ball is what you call this. Same thing going on there. Big female, smaller males. Clearly demonstrated there. Look how much bigger and stronger she is compared to the males that are chasing after her. Comparison with the heads there, male and female. Significant size difference. Adder, nice female adder. She sloughed her skin. She'll be wafting out pheromones. Males will be chasing after her. And then you get this mate guarding, similar to the sand lizards. It doesn't work. Okay. Lots of wrestling, displaying between the males, which are just basically trying to knock each other to the ground. Quite often, while the big macho males are doing this, a smaller male will sneak in and mate with a female while these guys are preoccupied with showing off. There's a melanistic male in the middle there. This pair I photographed in Gower a few years back. It's the precursors to mating, the courtship behavior you can see there. What a beautiful pale colored female adder she is. And there's the mating view. Grass snakes again, comparison of the males and the female. And here's a mating ball view right at the edge of the water. An adder eating its most common prey. Okay, so after mating, snakes are going to feed. Don't really feed before the mating, it tends to be after. So this adder is eating a bank vole. This is the reason adders are venomous. A bank vole packs a serious punch. It's got a serious set of teeth. Okay, the adder needs to use a different method to secure its food than the grass snake does, which the grass snake is just simply a have a go hero and grab hold of it because its prey doesn't have a retaliatory bite. This animal does. So it's evolved an advanced mechanism, which is venom, to overpower its prey. So as well as lizards, voles form a big part of the diet, but they've got serious teeth. So an adder needs to just be able to tag the vole, withdraw really quickly, give it a lethal injection, split second. The vole will then totter off and pass away a few minutes later. The adder can use its tongue to track down where the vole has travelled to and then safely feed upon the dead or dying vole without any fear of a retaliatory bite with those teeth, which could cause a nasty infection. That is why adders are venomous, not to make our lives miserable, is to be able to overpower a prey that's got a serious set of tools on it. Here we go, grass snake with a newt. That hasn't got to worry about getting bitten by a newt. Okay, it just grab hold of it any old way, try and get it to go down the right way. Here's one grabbing hold of a frog. Compare that to this young adder swallowing a lizard whole. Much shorter, stockier looking animal, snake there, yeah? Here's a couple of grass snakes fighting over a marsh frog. That's an introduced species of frog down in Hampshire. So much more have a go heroes. We don't care if there's any retaliation because there isn't going to be any retaliation from a soft-mouthed amphibian. And here's a juvenile grass snake chowing down on a tadpole. Terrestrially, is one that seems to be struggling with a toad, but the toad has just blown itself up, inflated itself. It will soon deflate, and it hasn't got much of a bright future ahead of it, that toad, I'm afraid. Here for you is a smooth snake swallowing a common lizard. You knew that was a common lizard anyway, and you knew it was a male because it's got such a bright orange speckled belly, and you can see it's got that hemipenal bulge, that bulging girth of the tail at the very base of the tail. Here we have a smooth snake's tail just disappearing out of sight down a burrow on some sandy heathland in Surrey. Okay, what it's doing there, it's tracked down some sand lizard eggs, and I've seen this happen before. Here's a closer view of him. I've seen it happen before. You can see the bulge as each egg passes down the snake, and it's quaffing down a clutch of sand lizard eggs. They're live bearers, so are adders, but grass snakes lay eggs and they need somewhere to deposit their eggs, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to find this naturally. Okay, that's a modern day problem. They have to travel and undertake sweepstake migrations. Sorry about the gory picture. Sweepstake migrations across roads. These eggs, there were 11 eggs in that grass snake. She was still twitching when I found her. I took the 11 eggs, I took them home, and I managed to incubate them. And out of the 11 eggs, 9 of them hatched out 6 weeks later. So that was quite a result. But it's a real sweepstake for female grass snakes to get somewhere safe to lay their eggs. You can help with this by creating and managing egg-laying sites. Some of my friends helping do just that, making a big pile of manure close to a pond. And there's some other people doing similar stuff. It's a great measure for them. They generally lay their eggs in decaying organic matter that produces heat and humidity. The juveniles are perfect replicas of the parents, beautiful shoestring type things. There's a size comparison for you. And there's the same for an adder. Tiny little creatures. Grass snakes don't have venom to defend themselves. They have a bizarre set of tricks up their sleeves. It says here, usually avoid a foul-smelling liquid if captured. Now, I have been, apart from when I was younger and used to catch snakes a lot when I was a kid, etc., I've been involved in some university studies and finding snakes and catching snakes for people to take measurements of in the past. It's quite some years ago now. But I wouldn't say that they usually void a foul-smelling liquid. They're guaranteed to every single time void an absolutely rank smell, which is basically semi-digested amphibian, which they squirt all over you. In a bizarre way, I kind of like it because it's nostalgic, because it reminds me of my childhood catching huge female grass snakes, using my mother's dressmaking tape to measure them, and then wondering why she said I could keep it afterwards. But these guys here are pretending to play dead. They're acting as if they're dead. Upside down, mouth open, tongue hanging out, combined with the stink, may give a good impression of something being dead. There's another one doing the same thing. Here's a photograph I took of one doing the same thing, but you'll notice this one's got very cloudy, bluish underside. That's because it's in a slough cycle, going to shed its skin very soon. Here's a female grass snake, a big, mature, particularly grumpy female grass snake. She's doing a bluff kind of, I'm a venomous cobra-like snake, you don't want to mess with me thing. It's nothing but bluff. Just not even opening her mouth to strike, but should be hissing and face and false bluff striking to put people off. All big female grass snakes that I've ever met have been like that. Here's another one. She was doing exactly the same thing. Really big, impressive animal. Yeah, I guess most people, that's the deterrent enough, but it didn't work for me. But I think that's how big female grass snakes get to be that size, by behaving like that, by being grumpy and freaking people out, I guess. So a long list of predators. This is like a scene from Jurassic Park. There's a dinosaur quaffing down a snake. Even though it's by the water, that's actually an adder. You can see what a short, stocky animal that is, the short tail. This is a grass snake. Yep, a dinosaur eating a snake. Herons are top predators for snakes. Pheasant. Pheasant poult swallowing a young grass snake. Pheasants are a real issue, along with cats, and would you believe it, rats. In certain situations, for hibernating reptiles, rats can be disastrous. Lots of threats, habitat loss, habitat fragmentation. We know all about this. Yeah, the fires and the grass fires we have. Succession, so habitats becoming less suitable for reptiles. And I'm afraid to say collection, persecution and disturbance. Some people think it's a good idea to kill adders and drape them across signs such as this, adder vigilantes, and even trends in management. So it's really difficult sometimes to manage and consider the needs of reptiles and habitats when some of these species that we're looking at here have been considered, because they have very different habitat requirements. So we try and identify particular habitat features that are already in existence at such sites beforehand, like hypernaculate, and try and avoid the management just around those specific areas. Here's us doing some good stuff. We got down a load of pines, created a south-facing ride, created a nice south-facing brash pole with the resulting brash. Reptiles of all kinds using it very quickly. All 4 reptile species there within 2 years. Can do positive stuff for reptiles sometimes. So thanks for listening. I hope you've got a better understanding about a snake species, very widely misunderstood group of animals. Yeah, any questions? Fire away.
Thanks, Pete. Really interesting as usual. We have a question from Jane in the chat, which is, will snakes go through bramble patches, and how does the smooth snake tunnel underground? 2 questions.
Yes, they'll go for bramble patches. I guess it depends how big the bramble patch is. If it's acres and acres and acres, it might be a bit much of an ask, but yeah, they pass through stuff. Grass snakes will pass through literally any habitat, whether it's suitable or not. They will cross all kinds of habitats. They're very mobile. Adders are much more sedentary and are not great at crossing anything other than habitat that they would actually occupy, if that makes any sense. Smooth snakes don't really tend to need to do any burrowing. They tend to be investigating burrows that other creatures, such as sand lizards, have already excavated. However, their habitat that they live in, the substrate is always sandy. So sand is very easy to burrow within.
Thank you. I had a question, which is like the color variation that you get in the adders. You know, you've got some grey ones and brown ones and blue ones. Do you tend to get more of a certain color in a specific habitat, or is it literally just random?
It feels pretty random to me,
Yeah.
if I'm honest. Interestingly enough, those blue adders are in a part of Derbyshire where I also see blue lizards. So
Okay.
I don't know what on earth that is about, and it's only a small percentage of the populations, both populations that are like that.
Right, okay. Just some sort of weird mutation, I guess. Or I can't imagine there's any sort of benefit to it. I'm not sure. Maybe there is.
Melanistic ones, like we said about the lizards, melanistic animals when may possibly heat up quicker, soak up heat quicker. But I'm sure there's disadvantages as well because black animals do also stand out in some situations more than something that's more critically patterned. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Okay. Um, there are well, there are two people typing, so I'm just going to wait because I think we'll have a couple more questions. What's your favorite snake?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
I don't have one.
Don't have a favorite.
Really don't have one.
Peter and Claire are asking, is it possible to construct a hibernation site for snakes?
Yeah, we've done it many times. We do it quite often as a byproduct of other habitat management, which might be clearing conifers, increasing light levels. We might be digging ponds there at the same time, so we might be pulling out root systems of conifers and things. So we can have, you saw those photos that we put up earlier of the ride that we created and all that huge, great 200-meter long ramble tangle of all the trees that we'd cleared. So we did like a 200-meter by 60-meter south-facing ride through conifers, and everything that we dropped, we left really high roots, high stumps, so that the digger could easily get the leverage to pull the root balls out entirely. And using every single bit of tree that was dropped down over the 200 meters by 60 meters and all the root systems all pushed in a great big south-facing brash pile that was 200 meters long, basically, and very structurally diverse. So that is what I call a hypernaculum that will be utilized for a few years because of its size. So you can make them for them, but generally they're not big enough because unless you make it really, really big, it's not going to have much of a core that's going to be suitable for them, if I'm making any sense. So it is quite often well-intentioned that when people make these hypernacular for snakes, etc., they're very seldom actually utilized by them unless they are in the right place and of significant size and structure, basically. If you've got snakes, then there will be hypernacular occurring naturally somewhere if you've got snakes. The thing is to try and identify where they are, and the only way to do that is through seasonal appropriate survey, which is now when they're basking, and they will be basking right by the hibernation site. We're going to talk all about that stuff in detail next week. But yeah, you can create hibernation sites for snakes. Much better is to identify where the pre-existing ones are and to manage them appropriately. So they may be becoming shaded, and you might need to do a bit of selective pruning without making it completely exposed, but just you'll feel for it when you see it, the light levels, etc. Maybe it needs fencing off because there's somebody's going to put in a load of cattle and they might trample all over it or something like that. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to that can be done, but it's more important to identify pre-existing hibernacula and safeguard them, if I'm making any sense, than to try and make our artificial perceived version of what it would be a good place for them to hibernate in, which it very rarely really is, if we're honest about it.
Yeah.
So yes and no.
Okay, thank you. Jane had asked a question below that, but I feel like you might have already answered it because her question was, so are best hibernation sites old burrows and hollows at the bottoms of tree, thinking management? So I feel like you might have already answered that, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jane. If you have any more follow-up questions, let me know.
A bank, a structurally diverse bank, anything that's raised so water can't get in there, and structurally diverse, so it can be tree roots, it can be like a labyrinth like limestone structure that's there below the surface, and an aspect south facing.
Perfect, thank you. Jane is typing, so I'm just gonna, I don't know if you're intentionally typing or whether you've just accidentally left some words in the chat box. There we are. She said, following on from the above, how do you find hibernation sites, and are cut hay stack piles that are left on site good for snakes?
All that is going to be discussed in the survey techniques in detail. Apart from the last thing that Jay mentioned about the piles of grass, cut grass. Yeah, basically that's a very crude description of a potential grass snake egg laying site. So failed hay bales or silage bales, that kind of stuff, if they're thrown in a sunny corner, and if the farmer keeps putting them in the same place, then you'll get grass snakes, female grass snakes using them year after year, and each year more will use them. And in 3 years' time, ones that hatched out there will start using it. It's just that they don't tend to be long lasting. That's probably one of the key things missing from grass snake ecology at most sites. And the more of them that there are, then the less need there is for them to cross roads, and less likely they're going to get run over, etc., etc. So yes, grass piles, loosely called grass piles, a bit more jazzy than that maybe. Mix them up with a bit of manure if you can. Wood chip, anything that's going to decompose and produce heat and humidity. But if it's all one thing, like if it's just grass, it could quite often be black and sloppy and gooey. So it's a bit like making a cake, a bit like making compost. If you mix grass cuttings with a bit of manure, with a bit of wood chip, get a much better thing going. So yeah, grass piles are better than nothing.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Right, I can't see any more questions in the chat, so unless anybody has anything else they want to ask, I will leave it there. I think that's
Thank
it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Pete. And yeah, next week is the last session, everyone. So yeah, we're going to be looking at reptile survey techniques. So please do come along. Jane, I'm sure you'll have more questions then. Yeah, thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of your evening, and I'll see you all next week, hopefully. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye, everyone.